Go ahead and open your Bibles to Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12. Starting a new series on renewal. And this is A good time of year. This is where our minds tends to be, is on renewal, and many people think that way during this time of year. Of course, if we think that way, we got to understand what it is that we're talking about. And the online dictionary gives us a definition of renewal. It says it's an instance of resuming an activity or state after an interruption. And I think that's the way we look at it. We're going to resume something. We're going to renew our efforts towards something. So this time of year, I'm going to renew my efforts towards exercise. We talked about that this morning and found out that nobody really has any plans on renewing their efforts for exercise who was here early. Or I'm going to renew my diet. I know, I've eaten good in the past, and I'm going to eat good in the future. I'm going to start eating good. And let me tell you, I've got plans on eating good today, too. Now, healthy, there's going to be some healthy stuff in there. But I'm going to eat good. I'm going to renew. I'm going to renew my Bible reading. I'm going to renew going to church. I'm going to all these things. Relationships. We renew relationships. Whenever I think of renewal, I think of the thing that always brings, as Sarah would put it, makes my heart smile, is Granny and Papa's wedding. On their 50th anniversary, we did a surprise wedding for them. It was a wedding renewal, and it was just this neat because they were taking that time together to renew their vows. You know what? Something's just not right. I need to make a change. Philip, could you come back up, get your praise team up here, and y'all just do another song? I'll be back.
Let's do multiply. We're going to go ahead and stand. We're going to sing another song together. If you know this one, sing along. If not, you can learn it.
Diamond.
I had to go change. Because renewal isn't restarting something. The biblical definition of renewal is a complete change for the better. The problem is, what we do sometimes is we take something from Scripture and we apply what we believe or what is the accepted meaning of something in culture, and as a result, we kind of miss out. And when we talk about renewal, it's important that as we go through this series that we understand we're not talking about increasing our efforts on something that we've already done. We're talking about making sure that there is a complete change. And that this change is absolutely for the better in all that we're doing. And so I just wanted to, and I feel like some of you still don't know, like, okay, what changed? Somebody explain it to you later. But we're going to change for the better. And as we go through this series, we're going to talk about changing a renewal of the mind, a renewal of holiness, a renewal of emotions, renewal in our families, and renewal of our witness. And we don't want to just start over and then be destined to end up in the same place where we find ourselves needing to be renewed. The reality is, they gave a percentage, and I don't have rewind on the radio, this was yesterday in the car, of how many people have already broken their New Year's resolutions. Because in their minds they said, I'm going to renew my efforts in some area, and now, less than a week into the new year, they have found that they couldn't do it. But we don't want to renew, we want to change. Because God changes us. And a right relationship with God, He doesn't just say, well, we do things a little better, and we're better people, and we're nicer people. No, He changes us. And we want to be renewed in all that God wants to do. He does this complete makeover, and everything that He is doing in your life will make you better. It's a change. Here's the other problem. The reality is, sometimes we struggle. We talked about spiritual growth this morning, and you know why sometimes we struggle with spiritual growth? Because we don't like change. Change just is like, well, I don't want to change. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. No, if you are going to grow, it requires a change. It's a spiritual change in your life. So we're going to go through this series with this idea each week, understanding that we're not talking about just getting better. We're talking about a complete change, and it's for the better. A complete change, and it's for the better. So this morning we're going to start off by talking about renewal of the mind. Renewal of the mind. You know, there's an old saying that was used in advertising. It's been a number of years back, so the young people probably won't even remember this. You may have heard the saying, though, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Have your parents ever told you that? Maybe they reworded it, but it was like, okay. But the idea of where that came about, that ad that it came about, it carried the idea, it was about higher education and getting people to give towards a scholarship fund and all these things. And here's what the idea was, that a mind without higher education was useless. A mind without higher education was useless. How many of you are useless this morning? Listen, there's nothing wrong with higher education. Here's the problem with that thinking, though. Being educated is not the catalyst that saves the mind. Being educated is not the catalyst that saves the mind. Man, if you decide to pursue higher education, good. God opens that door for you, good. If that's not the door that God has opened for you and that's not the pursuit of you, okay, that's good too. Because spiritually speaking, that education is not going to do anything other than hopefully, increase your knowledge in whatever area you're studying. Here's the reality, and I have to be careful here because you're staying in school. But the reality is, and those who don't have an higher education, haven't you learned a lot just in life? Higher education is more focused into an area of learning, but the reality is, you're going to learn either way. The mind is saved when it is transformed. Not when it is educated, but when it is transformed. So what does it mean to renew the mind? When we take the definition of renewal, it is thinking in a way that is completely different than before, but it is for the better. It's a complete change of how you are used to thinking, and it is a better change than how you are used to thinking. One of the verse that helps explain this and talks about this is Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. So he's saying, we need a renewed mind, but education isn't the answer. He does give us these instructions, though, in getting a renewed mind. And he starts out with the first step: don't follow the world's thinking. Don't follow the world's thinking. Now, I hope that this doesn't need a whole lot of explanation, but the reality is, when he uses that word conformed, and this is what generally happens. And I would tell you that everyone here has conformed to the world's thinking in some area. Being conformed, there again, the Greek word for conform means to fashion oneself after another's pattern. Conformity of thinking is exactly what the world is looking for. Conform to our way of thinking. The world, specifically the ruler of this world, which is Satan, desires us to think in a way that is completely opposed to God. And I think many of you would agree with that statement, that that's what Satan wants you to do, to think in a way that is completely opposed to God. But then you consider, wait a minute, the pastor said that there's some area that I conform to the world. And I love the Lord, and I would never think in a way that is opposed to God. The world has referred to religion, especially Christianity, as brainwashing. Have you ever heard that? Brainwashing. We're brainwashing our kids. If you go back into the nursery, I sat back there this morning, Holden is not being brainwashed, he's brainwashing He has actually turned our nursery workers' minds into mush. So it doesn't work with everybody. It just doesn't always take. It's interesting that they use this because that is exactly the method the world uses every day. Brainwashing. Trying to get you to think a certain way. The way that the person or the group, or in this case, the world, wants you to think. And if you don't think like them, here's their message. There must be something wrong with you. You ever feel that way? That if you see something different than your coworkers, your other kids at school, from what is shared on TV and the news media, or now a lot of people get their news from what do you use to get your news? Facebook. That is the best source of news. But the reality is, no, that is where a lot of people. Social media of some kind is for the younger generation. That's where they get their news, and they will make you feel like there is something wrong with you if you do not think the way that they think. And see, this hits at one of our core values. You know what one of our core values is? To be accepted. To be accepted. The reality is, no matter who you are, because some people are, I don't need to be accepted. I'm going to be my own person. But you're looking for somebody to accept you as your own person. You want someone to accept you. There's this deep-seated need for everybody to feel accepted. You know why? Because God created us to be in relationship with Him. And if we're not in relationship with Him, then we're looking for some other kind of relationship. We're looking for something else. We need to feel accepted. One of the reasons we get in trouble sometimes is because we're trying to find acceptance the wrong way, in the wrong crowd, in the wrong group. Why do we do that? Why would someone who knows that there's dangers in a certain area, and if they follow what this group is doing, that there's huge risk for doing that? Because that's the group that makes them feel accepted. And we all need to be accepted by someone. We need to feel that. And the world plays on that need that we have. And so they get us to think like them in various areas. And you can't protect yourself from the way the world thinks. Completely. It's everywhere. I used to listen to, if you remember way back, sports talk radio is all I listened to. I had like 4 presets in my, this was when I had the truck, and I need to check with Vern and see if those are still set. I'm hoping not to change those. But I had ESPN radio from Chicago, from Fort Wayne, and from Indy, and I think maybe there was 2 in the Fort Wayne area. I don't remember. There was 4 in our area, depending on what side of town you're on. There was 4 different ESPN radio stations that you could get, and you had to have all 4 of them preset in there, because when you were driving around, you would lose one station. You had to know which one you were going to next. And I listened to ESPN radio, sports radio, all the time. And there's a lot of thinking going on that had nothing to do with God. That was just wrong. Oh, well, it's just innocent. It's just sports. Well, but you look beyond that, and it's not. And here's the thing. Now, and it's been a long time. In my car, I don't think I have the sports station. It's been a while. I don't believe that it is
precept to it at all. I listen to some of the Christian radio stations in the area, and that's what I listen to. But you know what? Every once in a while, listening to these Christian radios, I'll hear stuff that says, yeah, that's worldly thinking. Even as believers, what can happen is we can take a biblical principle and apply worldly thinking to it. You know why we do that? We don't mean to do that, but the reality is we are exposed to worldly thinking from the time that we are born. We grow up with it. It's what our parents were taught. Oh no, my parents were good Christian people. Let me tell you, my parents are good Christian people. But everything that they were exposed to was of the world. And it creeps in. And it impacts the way we look at things at different times. Now here's what we need to understand. This is why this is so dangerous. Understanding where the world's thinking comes from. And if we understand where the world's thinking comes from, I think it ought to be like, oh, then I don't want any part of that. I can't allow that to impact me in my life. The world's way of thinking was developed through the denial of God. The world's way of thinking was developed through the denial of God. Oh, but wait a minute, Pastor, I already said I believe in God, so I don't think like the world. No. Let's just, don't jump ahead. You'll jump off the cliff. Let's just stay with this and look at this for a moment. Here's what the world's way of thinking in Romans 1:28. And it's talking about, in Romans chapter 1, it talks about, basically, it gives the blueprint of how we as a people, not as American people, but the people of the world, have ended up in the place in which we find ourselves today. And even before us. But the world just keeps getting further and further away from God. And here's where it says in verse 28, this is how this all came about. Since they did not see fit to acknowledge God. And I don't believe in God. I'm not going to accept God. I'm going to do my own thing. God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. He allowed them to think whatever it is that they wanted to think. You get that? God just said, fine. You're going to deny me? You know, sometimes people have different images of God. Some people see God as, oh, he's just all love all the time, and he goes around and hands everybody flowers, and it's all good. And some people, oh no, God is going to rain down his wrath upon you. You do anything wrong, and he's going to zap you. And the reality is, some people think, oh wow, that is God. Actually, those kinds of thoughts come because God allows people to think whatever it is they want to think about him. Now he reveals himself. So you don't have to think wrongly about God. But the world said, I don't want nothing to do with God. And God's like, okay. They refuse to acknowledge God. So in their mind, in the world's mind, it's a battle of wills. Well, it's me against God. But God isn't battling the will. You know, around here, sometimes we think we're battling God, my will against his will. No, he's battling for our soul. He's battling for our heart and a relationship with him. But the world didn't want a relationship with him. So they denied him. God did not lose the battle. It's important to understand. God didn't lose this battle in this battle of wills. Because the reality is, if God wants to make you do something, you know what's going to happen? You're going to do it. One thing you cannot deny. We have a free will because God said, all right. But God is sovereign. And the moment God says, but this is what you're going to do, you know what you're going to do? Exactly what God said you're going to do. Because God is sovereign. But most of our life is spent God saying, I'm revealing myself to you. You have a free will. You have to make this decision. This isn't a battle of your will against mine. You can try to make it that way. But if you're going to think wrong about me, that's because you are thinking like the world. You let them have their will. And as a result, thinking became completely opposed to God. Even, and here's the thing, even good thoughts about man, about humanity, about being good people, about being honorable people, they will lead us further away from God if we are not thinking right about God. Good thoughts don't lead you closer to God. Thinking right about God leads you closer to God. So we don't want to conform to this world, because everything that the world is doing, even stuff that looks good, is based upon self. Me want to do what I want to do. He says, rather than that, he says, so step two in renewing your mind, don't conform to the world is step one. Step two is transform your mind. Think the way God created you to think. And this is a complete change from what is in the world. And that complete change is better. It's better to think, to have your mind transformed, and to think about God in truth than to think about God in any other way. So a transformed mind starts with God as creator. He's sovereign. And he not only is he the creator, but he's sovereign. So what that means in layman terms, God first. God first. In everything. God first. When we transform our minds, and that is, wait a minute, I'm not rejecting God. God is my creator. I'm not rejecting God because God is sovereign. Another way to put that, God is God. And I have to always think of him that way. No matter what it is that I'm doing in life. In the things that I do that make me feel good, so when I'm seeking pleasure in life, I need to think about God as God. When I'm thinking about my relationships, and when I'm thinking about whatever those relationships are, so in a relationship between a man and a woman, I need to think about it not in what I want. I need to think about it as God as God. When I get married, in your marriage, the reality is you need to think about your marriage in this way, and the relationship that you have with your spouse. God is God. That's what a transformed mind does. Wait a minute. God is God. And that goes on to every relationship that we have. So when you're working and you end up working with a jerk, and how many have worked with a jerk? Don't show your hands because they may be here. The reality is we have struggles in this world, and the world tells us how to deal with those struggles. Oh, here's the best way to deal with those struggles. Wait a minute, I got to transform my thinking. I got to transform my mind. And instead of seeking the best way, what I need to do is start with God is God. I'm not saying that everything the world says is wrong, but I'm telling you they're going the wrong direction. And we need to start with God is God. That's the part of the mind being transformed. And then in Romans, what he tells us to do, and this is interesting because he tells us to put this to the test. He said you're going to be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God. So you're going to put this to the test. So that's what he says the third thing to do. Don't conform to this world. Transform your thinking and put it to the test. Put this to the test. Put what to the test? That in every area of your life, The first thing is God. Because He is your creator and He is sovereign. And in so doing, you know what He says? In Romans chapter 12 there, He says, if you do this, you're going to be able to discern what is the will of God. And that will of God is good and acceptable and perfect. You know one of the questions as a pastor I get often? How do you know what the will of God is? How do you know what the will of God is? Don't think like the world. Transform your mind. Put that to the test. Putting God first in every area of your life. And you'll start understanding what the will of God is. You'll start knowing what it is that God is trying to do in your life, in you and through you. We struggle with that. See, to know the will of God, I have to believe in the sovereign God. God is God. So this means that even in the things that I don't understand, the reality is there's going to be a lot of stuff that we face in life that we don't understand. That's the reason education really doesn't set the mind free. One thing that you'll learn, no matter what area of study that you're studying, and I'm not anti-education, I have education that I greatly, greatly appreciate. But the thing that I found out, and Philip has found out, that after you get all that education and you go out into the real world, it's like, oh, there's a whole lot of stuff they didn't teach me. Why did I give them all this money? But you start understanding, wait a minute, there's so much I don't understand. So I must submit my thinking to that which I know to be true about God. That's what we do when we don't understand. We submit our thinking to what I know to be true about God. You know what I know to be true about God? He's God. He's sovereign. And when I start doing that, then I start understanding God's will. It renews my thinking. And with this renewed thinking, here's what happens. A renewed mind, not only is it going to acknowledge God, that God is God, but it trusts and obeys God in a completely better way. That's what renewal is. Trusting, changing in where now this is a completely better way. To trust and obey God. The default of our thinking comes from the world. And the world is always seeking, what is best for me? Isn't that what they tell us? Oh, this is what's best for you. And this is what's best for everyone. And you will like this. And if you are thinking correctly, you will know this is what's best for you. This is what's best for me. And because we do that. A lot of our decisions, a lot of our thinking, what is at the core of our thinking and our decisions? When I'm making a difficult decision, you know what's at the core? Me. That's what the world's taught me to do. Me first. Not God first. But a renewed mind is like, man, I have to trust and obey God. And now, I don't think about me first. You know, the problem is, when we think about me first, there's a lot of me's in the world. So you end up with all these me's competing with each other for what is best for me. Because what you determine, what is best for you, may go against what I determine is best for me. Well, who's right? God. God is right. Remove me from the equation. Start with God. Now we're not competing with each other. It's a renewed way of thinking. I do what I don't fully understand sometimes because I have a faith in God that leads me to think that I should just trust and obey Him. Even if it doesn't look like it's best for me. I think we see a little bit of an example of this from his mother Mary. And this was the first recorded miracle that Jesus did in John chapter 2. It says, on the third day there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee. The mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. So Mary's mom's there, and Jesus shows up, and his disciples are with him. It says, when the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, they have no wine. And Jesus said to her, woman, what does this have to do with me? What? My hour has not yet come. And then his mother said to his servants, do whatever he tells you. Always found that perplexing. He just said, back off. And she turns and do whatever he says. Mary had no idea what Jesus was going to do. Her response to go to Jesus in the first place comes from a renewed mind that Jesus, her son, was the Messiah. She knew and she believed this from the time where Jesus, even before Jesus' birth, the angels first revealed it to her, and we just celebrated this and all this. She believed that he was the Messiah. Therefore, the only thing to do is whatever he commands. The only reason to go to him to begin with is because she trusts him. She wasn't coming to him with her preconceived solutions. She wasn't coming to him to send him on an errand. Oh, Jesus, have you ever done this to your kids? You go to them and, oh, you're driving now, right? Yeah. Has mom ever come to you? Hey, I need you to run up to the store. That's what I understood. It's not because she trusts you, it's because she forgot something and she wants you to cover up for her own. No, let's not go there. No, isn't that going to be more the human mindset? You see this story, you start out, oh, this is relatives or friends or something. Hey, you know what? I can do something to help out in this situation. Where's my boy at? He can help out. That's not what she's doing. She's going to him not as her son. She's going to him as the Messiah, the Son of God. She goes to him because he is the Son of God, and she trusts him. Isn't it the reality sometimes we approach God more as our personal errand boy? God, I've got this problem. Here's what I need you to do. That's how the world thinks. Because the world is all about me. And if I think that way, you know what? When I have a problem, because God has told me to bring all my cares, all my concerns, everything that goes wrong in my life, God has said to bring it to him. And that's true. You know what he didn't say to do? Bring the solution with you. But I find that sometimes that's what I do. God, here's my problem. Here's how you can fix it. No, I'm thinking differently. A complete new way of thinking. And it's for the better. Let God be God. She didn't bring the solution. She said, Jesus, I have a problem. He said, what do you want me to do about it? And then, out of trust, she said, and obedience, do whatever he says. I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know what he's going to say. Trust him and obey him. That's the kind of thinking that a renewed mind has. Trust, here's a principle. Trust is based on God's plan for you, which is better than any other plan that you have considered for your life. Trusting God is that I trust his plan for me, and it's better than, even though I don't understand it, even though I don't have all the details, and he's being somewhat secretive about the whole thing. But I trust that it's going to be better than anything that I have ever considered for my own life. Anything that me has ever come up with. See, our plans puts me first. It's what we understand best. Me. But trusting God says, you know what, God, I'm just coming to you, and here's my problem. I'm not offering up any solutions. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm trusting you because you got a plan, and you're doing something in my life. And I want to think that way about you. And I want to think that way about life. That's what Jeremiah 29, Jeremiah is speaking to people who are in a dark place, to Israel. And he says, God is speaking through Jeremiah, and he says, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. That's what we have to trust in. That God's will for us, God's purpose for us in this life is a whole lot better. Not just, I think that's the best option. That's the only option. That's the only good option is God's plan. That's where my future, that's my hope. And then look what he says. Then, when you start trusting God's plan as the only plan, as the best plan, better than anything that you could ever come up with yourself, you'll call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. Then you'll start approaching God as God. You'll start thinking about, wait a minute, this is God. This is how I know. I'm going to go to him. I'm going to talk to him, and he is going to hear me. Me thinking always has a plan. Always has a plan. Me always sets a course for life. Me always considers what might hurt me. Me always looks for what makes me happy. The problem is, in my problems, I acknowledge me first. Instead of just trusting God. God, how could you be doing anything in my life that's worth value when I have this problem? I need you to fix it. That's what's best for me. Fix it. Listen, when you have a problem in life, be honest with God. If it hurts, you tell him. this is what's going on. And I don't like it. Jesus did the same thing in the garden. Father, I don't like this cup that is before me. But he didn't say, send the angels. Send the army of angels. Take care of this. Fix it. He said, but this isn't about me. It's about you and your will. And that's how we approach God. That's a new way of thinking, taking me out of the equation. That's a different way of thinking. We've been trained our whole life. Man. You know, I enjoy going over to the nursery on Sunday morning, seeing the kids playing. And I try to get them to laugh and have a good time. And I'm teaching them to be Cowboys fans. Because I know they're in a world where there's a lot of messed up thinking. You know, it'd be real easy for me to get any of them to cry. All I have to do is go over to whatever toy they're playing with and take it from them. Because they learn at an early age, it's me first. They know that that toy in that moment is what is making me happy. And you take that from me. We've been thinking incorrectly for a long time. Trust God. It's God first. And He's got a plan that is so much better than anything you have ever considered. I'm not saying not to make plans for your life. What I'm saying is God first. We've got to make plans for our life. You have decisions in life, and God has given you a mind so that you can think. Use reasoning. Just don't use the world's reasoning, and don't use your reasoning. The easiest thing to do on any decision is come to the conclusion that whatever I want must be best. So the reality is, the Cowboys are better than the Colts, and all you are wrong. But we don't just do it about sports, which is just trivial. We do it about every decision we have to make in life. You know why so many relationships end in divorce or broken relationships? Me first. Well, this just wasn't working out, and here's how we justify it. It wasn't working out for either one of us. Well, that's two different people. If that's true, that's two different people saying this isn't good for me. Because we live in a world of competing needs. But I'm going to trust that God has a better plan. And I don't see it, I don't understand it, but I'm going to trust Him in my relationships, in my work, and all that I do. As I live my life and my witness, everything that I do. A renewed mind not only completely changes the way we think about God and how we approach God, it completely changes our response also. So I'm going to approach God. I'm going to come to Him with this trust. I'm going to come to Him, God first. Why? Because I trust Him. But then I'm going to obey Him. And obedience, this is important, obedience is not a reasoned response to your desired outcome, but a reasoned response based on a different and better way of thinking about God. A reasoned response about my desired outcome based on my desired outcome, I'll obey in the areas that I want to obey. Because they suit me. I can do that. I can follow that. If I trust God based on a renewed mind, I don't need to understand everything. And when Mary turned and said, do whatever he says, she had no clue what was fixing to happen. No clue. And the reality is, that's the way we face life most of the time. We don't understand what God is doing. Which is good, because me is completely incapable of understanding everything. God's ways do not make sense to me. To me first thinking. They'll never make sense to me first thinking. Because it is God. That's what he says in Isaiah 55. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. But I don't obey. Why? Because I need to think about this. I need to consider what's best for me. I'm not thinking that the best thing I can do is obey, whether I understand or not. Well, me can't understand. But you can't obey. Me struggles with obeying. That doesn't come as a surprise to some of you. But when I talk about me struggling with obeying, the reality is, you struggle with obeying too. Why? Because you have a me. And me struggles with obeying. And what does it say? Me don't have the ability. Well, that's because the world wants you to look at yourself as being deficient. That somehow God made you incomplete. No, sin has separated you from God. You're all sinners. We all are. But God didn't create junk. And where the world wants you to look at yourself and look at your inabilities, God wants you to look at Him first. And His ability. Because if God is calling you to do something, then He is going to enable you to do it. So you just obey. Unless you believe, you think like the world wants you to think, and think, I can't. Me don't have the time. Because the world wants you to look at your calendar. I got to tell you, I don't have the phone. Suddenly, it's like, oh, wait a minute. I made a complete change, and I left out a very important part of my phone. And it's funny how sometimes you're so used to something being there, and then when it's not there, it's like, oh no, don't look at me. If I had my phone, I was going to pull it out, and I was going to show you. The thing that I love about my phone is my calendar. And now, and people are like, and my calendar's full. And it's good because somebody calls up and says, hey, can we get together? Let me look at my calendar. I got it right here. I don't have to wait till I get back to the office. I don't have to check with Carol. And her calendar is completely different than my calendar. And the reality is whatever she tells me, it trumps my calendar. Because me calendar is her calendar. Is that? But the reality, I love it because I can look and I can see what is my schedule. And it's like, wow. You know what? If you look at my calendar, you know what you're going to say? Oh, you're pretty busy. You look at Philip's calendar and you're going to say, what is it that you do? It's like, well, wait a minute. And we have this idea, wait a minute. Now the world wants you to say, you're too busy. You got too much that you are doing. In order to do what God wants you to do, God just needs to be reasonable. Well, God is reasonable. And He wants you to stop thinking like the world and think God first. And then not only me don't have the ability, me don't have the time, he's scared. Because the world wants you to fear it rather than God. The world wants you to fear it rather than God. Another struggle, it will cost me too much. It will cost me too much. And the world wants to look at the personal, worldly cost. What does it cost you? Your relationship with the world. Your relationship with things. And things that are in the world. The reality is, if you don't think God first, it costs you much more. It's your relationship with God. And seeing what He's trying to do in your life. Not only in you, but through you. And make an impact. The reality is, obeying God leads to other people being impacted by what He's doing. God is rarely having you obey Him just so He can say, oh, look what I can make them do. He's not asking you to do anything just for the joy of seeing you work. He has a plan and a purpose. Difficult for us to understand. He wants you to obey because He's going to use your obedience. Not only are you going to draw closer to Him, it's going to impact somebody else's life. And that's the part that we don't ever get. And even sometimes when we think we do get it. Oh, He's going to use me, because He's going to use me to grow character. Maybe not. We got to, no, what are we thinking? We're trying to figure out the mind of God. Obedience just obeys. It doesn't matter whose life God is trying to impact. Just obey. Don't try to consider and figure out why, because I need to see if I'm really going to do this or not. Just obey. I got to tell you, I would not be here. It's not that I always think about God first. But I tell you, the only reason I'm here was a complete change of thinking. And I absolutely love being here. It's not that it's all been good. But I see God doing the work in my life. I've seen God growing me in ways, some of them I didn't think I needed to grow in. But I did. And I've seen how God has worked through me, through our church. I've seen God work in your life, and that's because He's worked through our church. That comes from trusting and obeying, and it comes only from putting God first. Me will always have a reason for disobedience or delayed obedience, which are the same. But a renewed mind will trust and obey. A renewed mind leads us to a completely new way of thinking that is always for the better. Always. Let's stand with our heads bowed and eyes closed.